Utah kindergartners face potential 6-month jail terms and fines for mask violations. The good news is that when the little felons are formally incarcerated, they will already be equipped with the latest sexual information, courtesy of their public schools. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, and if you really wanted to know what I mean by crazy, we start in the state of Utah, where children as young as 5 years old are being threatened with legal charges and jail time if they get caught not wearing a mask in school. I wonder, mask violations. What if you're a kid who just can't take it and pulls it down and wipes his nose? At what point is this insanity going to stop? And now you're threatened, as if the average elementary school kid isn't already feeling disproportionate burden because of what's going on with COVID. Now you're sending them to school, you're forcing them to wear masks, and you're telling them even the slightest moving of your mask, young man, will result in the SS coming to interrogate you and your family. You might be taken to the camps.
Jeez. It's only going to get worse from here. So they're having to comply with Governor Gary Herbert's mandatory mask order. And yes, it includes the kindergartners. No, we've talked about this, and I've heard from a lot of teachers, a lot of parents. The parents who seem to be most anxious about this, okay, if they go back to school, what happens, are those who have the youngest kids. Because if you've been around any child, you know they like to touch things, move things. Mm-hmm. My 9-month-old, I had to have a mask on, yes, and just kept pulling my mask off. If he had to put it on his own face, guess what he'd be doing? 5-year-olds can't be expected to have a mask on for the entire time. It's just going to come off. But according to Governor Gary Herbert, they could get fined or even go to jail now, as you said. Herbert spokeswoman Anna Lennart on the other week confirmed that the potential criminal penalty would be, for violating the requirements, would be not enforced, but it's possible that they could be enforced because these are the kind of stupid things that we like to actually enforce.
So if you're not going to enforce it, the fact that you're pretending to enforce it is causing psychological distress for no reason.
And she said it rarely will be pursued. I wonder who it's actually going to be pursued against.
So, nice way to go.
Rarely.
We're passing laws. We're issuing mandates. Nothing's legal about any of this. We're issuing mandates that we're already saying we're going to be very selective in how we pursue them. How is that remotely constitutional?
Yeah, and then they're passing along the buck to the schools to say, okay, school, well, if, little Johnny refuses to wear the mask, then you can push little Johnny out the door and make him take online schooling.
Well, the good news is that there are no longer cops in the schools because they got rid of them who could arrest these little kids, right?
Yeah,
I suppose that is there one silver lining in all of this stupid anti-cop rhetoric coming from the left? Well, there are no police left in the schools to actually have to enforce these ridiculous mandates.
And on the good news front, there will be exceptions for those with medical conditions and during breakfast or lunchtime. There will be exceptions to wearing a mask during lunch.
There are exceptions. There's selective enforcement. There are mandates. We don't plan to. So, okay, what's your point? As ridiculous as this sounds, given how American academics and school administrators are behaving, I was reading in someplace, maybe Singapore, I don't remember, where they just built plexiglass boxes around the kids' desks. So no have to wear a mask. They had, 5 foot tall plexiglass shield all around the desk. The kid could sit there. He could breathe. She could breathe, right? She could talk and be heard. Why not go that way with it? Why not do it that way?
But there's been I've seen a lot of parents or a lot of school teachers put pictures out there saying, oh, they have those dividers, like they have the clear plexiglass or shower curtains in some instances, but you can't just do that. You also have to still on top of it do the mask and then do everything else.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. I personally would have loved to be boxed off in a little
you know what? The rest of your class would have enjoyed it too.
Exactly. A little translucent box on my own little space, right? I'm okay with that.
Well, we'll put you in a box now.
What are we trying to accomplish with this stuff? At some point, you progressives have to realize this is a kind of psychological terror that you're inflicting on these kids. You're not fixing anything. You're not helping anything. Why not? If you have to release mandates, how about releasing mandates that are actually manageable? So you don't have to exempt people. So you don't have to have selective enforcement, because all you're doing is really confusing people.
Well, yeah, and then the thing is, the people in Utah had been like, okay, well, let's solve the problem. Oh, we don't like the masks, so let's try the clear plastic face shields. And they did that, and then the very next day after school opened and had pictures of kids with that, the governor came in and said, nope, that is not enough. Right. So now they mandated exactly what that mask must look like.
Well, and interestingly, coronavirus is that the previous ones that the governor of Utah had issued for the whole state, coronavirus-related mandates are set to expire this week in Utah, but the requirements for masks in schools will remain because it was issued by the Utah Department of Health. This is in Wisconsin, we had a similar situation where the Department of Health was issuing mandates, and they've got no constitutional power to do it. They've not been elected to anything. They are not your governor or your state legislature. And so in Wisconsin, Republicans actually took to court to stop these mandates coming from the Wisconsin Department of Health. And guess what? The Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed that these health departments, let alone I don't think governors have the power to do this in most instances, but certainly departments of health do not. And so the governor's mandate, the amount of power that the government had, was always conditional. He had certain number of weeks or months to be able to enact these plans. It's run out now, so that's over. And it would be very difficult for this governor to turn around and try to do it again. However, he's got the Department of Health who's now doing it for him. And you see what happens when you get the Department of Health doing this. They're not legislators. They're not operating through any constitutional propositions. They haven't been ran campaigns and had to vote, had to be elected. No. They're health agents. So the governor said to them, you make the rules that I would make, but I can't anymore. What kind of a crazy, ridiculous, dystopic system are we creating for our kids?
On a scale of 1 to utterly shocked, where would you fall if I told you that there's a correlation between stronger teachers' unions and the likelihood that the school will reopen? On the scale of 1 to utterly shocked. That there's a strong correlation between the strength.
What would be less than 1?
Negative 22.
Negative 22.
Okay, well, Education Week has been tracking and sharing basically reopening plans for a lot of schools across the nation, especially the large districts, which have very strong, very large teachers' unions. And so they have laid out basically what, up to date as they can, because everything keeps changing, what these school districts plan to do. And at least as of August 21st, 21 of the 25 largest school districts are choosing remote learning only as their back-to-school plan. So you have remote learning only, some sort of a hybrid, or hey, let's actually go to school. And 21 of the 25 largest school districts across the whole nation are remote learning only. And guess what? In those same 21 of 25, they have large teachers' unions.
Let's sink into the gentle bath of stupidity. All right, let's have a Calgon take me away moment. And we start to consider this, right? To the surprise of absolutely nobody, the 21 of the biggest teachers unions in this country have decided on the grounds that have nothing to do with health or safety or education that they're going to keep their teachers from teaching. All this is a scam. This is about the power of the unions. This is about changing the political culture. This is about getting rid of Donald Trump and thereby getting rid of Betsy DeVos. So you can go back to the swamp system where educators were unaccountable and kept getting more money. Schools, we just kept dumping money into them. I mean, we're still doing that under the Trump administration, but at least people are paying attention to it now, right? And Betsy DeVos has reversed some of the most criminally stupid policies of the Barack Obama Department of Education. However, what we have here, and this is across the board. This is not just schools, although we're talking about a school issue here. We're looking at the post office is being weaponized for this very reason right now. It has nothing to do with fairness or equity or justice. It's simply about getting rid of this outsider Trump and his dangerous challenges to the status quo swamp way things have been done. And with education, that means all the money keeps coming with generous raises every year for everybody. No one ever gets fired. No one can ever lose their job. However they molest their children, they're still going to be protected by the unions. We're not going to really have any responsibility to make sure your kids can read and write. We're not going to be held accountable for that. None of that. Meanwhile, we will give your kids sexuality lessons that would make a porn star blush. We're going to force your kids now to study history through the false lens of 1619. No accountability, endless resources, or we're not going to teach in your schools.
And what's kind of interesting to think about is the largest school district, New York, is one that is at least doing a hybrid. But then the next 8, 9 of them are just remote. And remember, this is 21 of the 25 largest school districts overall. And now when you tie into that the teachers' unions, school districts in states that require union membership, are 25 percentage points less likely to plan to reopen with full-time in-person instruction. Meaning if you have a big union,
that's right,
and it's required, because that's how you get a big union, is you just have to require it. 25 percentage points less likely that they're actually going to reopen in person, because let's just stay on our cushy couches and teach from home. And then, and that's compared to the right-to-work states, okay? So about 38% of school districts in right-to-work states have decided to offer full-time in-person instruction, whereas only around 13% of school districts in states that require the union membership are offering the same. You see what's kind of going on here? Can you put it all together? And what's interesting, I found the largest school district that is opening full in-person is Cypress Fairbanks ISD, and that's in Texas, and they have 116,000 students that they serve. That's the highest one that's actually going back.
So the kids are going to go back, and they're going to be just fine. The kids who stay home are going to get an even crappier education than they usually get, and no one's going to complain about that. As John Valent, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, and Brookings is, by the way, is a left-leaning thing. It's not a left-wing think tank, but it's a left-leaning think tank. And so John Valent, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, found COVID-19 risk was not statistically related to school district reopening decisions. It's not. Of course it's not. His analysis found that school district reopening decisions are instead related to people's political leanings and support for Donald Trump.
Stop it.
The latest data show that a 10 percentage point increase in the share of Trump voters from the 26th presidential election in a county is associated with an 11 percentage point increase in the likelihood of a school district reopening for in-person in the fall. Likewise, the less support Trump has in an area, the less likely the school district is to offer in-person learning.
Wow.
So if you don't like Donald Trump, you don't want your kids to go back to school because it hurts him. They figure any return, let's sink it. For your progressives, and whether they're teachers or school administrators or they're intellectuals, anything that helps Donald Trump, even a little bit, hurts the country. So we can deprive kids of an education. We can destroy kids. We can force them to do online paradigms that the public school teachers aren't prepared to teach. We can do all of that simply because our political selfishness and greed inhibits us from doing the right thing. This is really wrong. It's wrong on so many levels, and it shouldn't. So you asked me how surprised I would be. Who's surprised by this at all? I mean, and how many Democrat moms and dads are okay with their kids getting ripped off for an education, an expensive education, if it hurts Donald Trump? Childish. And again, can you imagine if we had this exact situation and Barack Obama was president, and you had districts that don't like Obama keeping their kids home? How much do you want to bet Obama would have passed an executive order sending police to drag those kids to schools?
It would be racist to keep your kid.
Can you imagine? And the whataboutism is annoying, I know, but seriously, this is a place where I think it's exactly huge. Can you imagine the Obama administration and imagine COVID? And of course, he would have had no more success fighting COVID than Trump did, because you're not going to fight it by traditional means. So you have all these conservative school districts who are keeping their kids home in the fall in an election year when Obama has to win his second 4 years, and it's making him look bad. You even got people telling you this, right? Can you imagine? You really think Obama would have not made some kind of an executive order that would have compelled by force those kids into classrooms? Absolutely.
Well, back in Texas, where the kids are actually going to school, as we learned in the last segment, at Lubbock Cooper High School in Texas, they allow students to decorate their parking spots, the reserved parking spots, before the school year begins, which I think it's kind of cool. Gives kids opportunity, creativity,
a little
all of
ownership for the kids.
Ownership, responsibility. Well, a group of 10 students decided to theme their spots to say Trump 2020. But of course, when you put something so controversial as, Trump 2020, it's going to get vandalized. And that's exactly what happened to these students' spots. As you can see, there's graffiti all over it. And there's actually another spot not too far away that also got vandalized. And it said, the F word and Trump. But the vandals, they're not the smartest, I'll say, in the bunch. They put a lot of BLM, Black Lives Matter, all over it. But they also decided to write phrases such as, I can't breath, which is supposed to say breathe, and save the families. They can't spell the word families.
Maybe it's a Mexican family. Tamales.
Ooh,
the thing
tamales
that gets
are so
me, go
good.
back to that picture, Mike. Yeah, they spelled everything wrong, but we've reached the ridiculousness of our culture says that when they spell things wrong, it's not a mark of lack of education. It is a protest. All of this
yes.
focus on correct English is racist. It's white supremacist. And that's really kind of stop for a second right there and look. When you look at this angle, that took a lot of time. Trump 2020. That's beautiful, right? And when you look at the scrawlings around it, I can promise you this. If what you had was Black Lives Matter 2020, yet a bunch of kids did that, and a group of kids vandalized it this way, those kids would be suspended if not expelled.
Of course they would, but that'd be a lot of spots to put in. Oof,
but it's
Black Lives
amazing
Matter.
when you stop and think about it, though. How did we get to the point as a nation where you allow this kind of disparate justice, right? For young white students, for that matter, to vandalize that Trump sign is now considered a legitimate form of social protest. But if the tables were turned and it was said Black Lives Matter, those same white kids, if they had vandalized that, would be considered racist for doing it. This country is going to fall to pieces if we do not assert, which is ironic, right? Because what Black Lives Matter is not asking for is equal justice. They're asking that our justice system based on equity be thrown out and replaced with something that gives them artificial advantages. They are demanding not equity, not equal treatment. They are demanding to have privileges and perks and rights and abilities that nobody else has. So that includes white kids fronting for Black Lives Matter. The country cannot survive that.
Well, we don't know who did the vandalism yet,
Well,
so
but
it might not.
Is it fair to say it's not a Trump supporter?
Yeah,
Right,
that's
okay.
But it's still the
But
district.
Black Lives Matter was scrawled on the right?
BLM,
It was okay.
So we'll see. But the school officials did say that they're going to move to prosecute anyone who was responsible for destroying or defacing the school property. It was interesting to note that one of parent of the group of friends who got together, they said it took them 8 hours and they spent $750 painting those spots. So a lot of money, a lot of time. And Superintendent Keith Bryant said that all parking spot designs have to be approved by the administration before they're painted, and that political statements are not prohibited, but the designs must follow the dress code, which means that they can't contain profanity, vulgar images, statements, all that, which now, because of the vandalism, it does, at least on the other kids where it said F Trump.
So why couldn't these kids just use their parking spaces? I mean, right?
They might not have been kids. We don't know who did it. That's
don't know.
the thing.
Well, why not pick some of those empty spots and use them to make your message known? What is this inability of the left to allow competing messages to fight with each other? What is this radical need for censorship? Sadie Alderson, Director of Public Information for Lubbock Cooper, said, quote, "We have students and staff with differing political beliefs. Yes. And we expect those beliefs to be respected and valued. Yes. As United States citizens, we have the freedom to disagree with each other. Yes. But it is completely unacceptable and illegal to vandalize property in disagreement. Yes, 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 yes. As a public school district, we have an obligation to protect not only our students, but their rights. Yes, 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 yes. It's no more complicated than that."
It's time for some real education. The Colossus of Rhodes was a statue of the Greek sun god Helios, erected in the city of Rhodes by Chares of Lindos in 280 BC. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, it was constructed to celebrate the city's successful defense from a tyrant who had besieged it for a year with a large army and navy. According to most contemporary descriptions, the Colossus stood approximately 108 feet high, which is the approximate height of the modern Statue of Liberty, from feet to crown. This made Colossus the tallest statue in the ancient world. It collapsed during the earthquake of 226 BC, although parts of it were actually preserved.
So it's only around for a few decades. But if you take a look at the picture, Mike, that's the one. Brilliant imagery where you could actually sail into the town through the legs of the great Colossus, right? And if you go to the next one, if you get a sense of that image. Now, these are all art images of modern artists. We don't know what it looked like. We don't have the residue of that statue. So we don't know exactly what it would have looked like. And you can see in this one, the statue does not straddle the bay. So in go to the previous one, it was thought that maybe the ships would sail underneath it. You go to the other artist renditions, not necessarily. We don't know. To be quite frank with you, the idea that a statue the size of the Statue of Liberty would accommodate rather large vessels to get underneath it that way would be impractical. It's probably more like this. But looking at that picture, we see the crown on the head of the Colossus, and you can begin to see what the parallels are between the statue of the ancient Colossus and the one that would become the Statue of Liberty. Both monuments were built as symbols of freedom. The Statue of Liberty has been referred to as a modern Colossus and is 34 meters tall, roughly the same size as the Colossus of Rhodes. There is also a plaque inside the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty that is inscribed with a sonnet called "The New Colossus, not like the brazen giant of Greek fame," right? This symbol, both were meant to talk about the liberation, but the special immigration status of the Statue of Liberty makes it somewhat different. There has been a debate among historians about whether the statue was standing on one foot or straddling. Some have discounted this theory and believe that it stood in a more usual Greek pose on the side of the harbor. If the Colossus was built with its legs straddling, as we said before, would make it there would have been different repercussions when the statue finally fell during the earthquake. The statue was actually built with an iron frame, and over this the Rhodians used carved and sculptured brass plates to create the outer structures of Helios. That's who it is. The statue, the Colossus, is Helios, the god of the sun, which is why the crown looks to be like radiating beams of the sun, which is also a trope that was adopted by the creator of the Statue of Liberty. The architect of the Colossus, as Katie reminded you, was Chares of Lindos, a student of the very famous, perhaps the most famous sculptor in the ancient world, Lysippus, who had previously created a 19-meter-tall statue of Zeus. And in the 7th century, a little bit more history, the Arabs conquered Rhodes, dismantled what was left of the statue, and sold it for scrap metal, right? There's a cultural lesson in there somewhere I'm not going to make at the moment.
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have any questions for us, please visit freedomproject.com/askduke and send the questions our way. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. In Salt Lake City, Utah, there is a family-run novelty shop called Loftus International, where they sell between 10,000 and 20,000 rubber chickens every year. I'm just wondering if they could use these rubber chickens, tie them up, and use it as a face mask.
Utes? Excuse me, did you say Utes?
Utes.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay Colossus, my friends.